We've done a couple of different lines of development with the military specifically. One is for the war fighters, and that primarily today is with the U.S. Army and with the U.S. Navy. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, when the military was literally landing helicopters in our parking lot, we've always maintained high stocks of fresh and frozen food on site. And that turned out to be a blessing through the pandemic when, for a number of different reasons, supply shut down virtually overnight. Government purchases are one or several items in extremely large quantities. That stayed relatively constant, but now the individuals that maybe work for that department or work for the Department of Defense are now making individual purchases, and that has gone up recently. The other side of that development has been sort of the civic defense, the continuity of government. That's a whole different institutional realm. So there's a couple of different ways that we've gone with the military. It's only been the last probably 10 or 12 years that we actually started making our products available to the consumer, because historically it was just through the government. People are going into debt over their food purchases. 5 of everything. I'll take 10 of this, 10 of that, and 10 of that. Almost like panic buying.
Do you ever get any notable people making large purchases?
Quite a few. Yeah, more than I ever would have imagined, to be honest with you.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with a very special guest. Steve Saws is the owner of Freeze-Dried Wholesalers, and they produce a very high quality food for governments and military defense contractors. And I think it's the choice of the elite for stocking their Doomsday bunkers. And this is also now available for civilians. Guys, it's very important, especially this day and age, with so many companies saturating the market with low quality foods, playing on people's insecurities, trying to sell them stuff that is very low grade quality, knowing that those people are just going to put it in a closet and forget about it. And then in 25 years, when they go to take a bite of it, they're going to regret doing that. So this is why I brought Steve Saws on. This is a company that I was just made familiar with not too long ago. A subscriber sent me a message, and then we got to talking on the email. And I can tell you that Steve is the real deal. So thanks for coming on, Steve.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, and I must say, I just ate some salmon and ancient grains this morning, freeze-dried, and that was quite possibly the best freeze-dried meal I've ever eaten.
Coming from you, I consider that to be extremely high praise. Thank you.
No, it's really good stuff. Like, I was actually blown away. Yeah, why in your mind is freeze-dried food the best type of food for preppers?
You know, there's a lot of reasons. Probably the top of that list is the shelf life. You know, you're just not going to get that 25 plus year shelf life with dehydrating or canning. Most importantly is we don't change the state of the food. You're getting it as close to all natural as you can. Same caloric, same nutritional values prior to freeze drying.
And what is the shelf life of the food that you make? Because I know you guys don't have expiration dates.
Yeah, we don't. We're a little bit different. We advertised a 10 plus year shelf life, but we guarantee 25 years. And we've proven that with lab work through a couple of different university studies and 21 years, frankly, of history. Honestly, I say indefinitely. The way that we package, until you tear that factory seal and introduce oxygen, it likely will outlive you and I.
Yeah, I mean, the industry standard is 25 years for freeze-dried food, but I think that's probably pretty conservative. I know Mountain House has done some testing out to like 40 years, and they found that it was still fine for consumption. So you're saying that it could potentially last indefinitely with the way that you package it. And I hope to get a better sense of how exactly you do that today. What are the various types of things you freeze dry? And I think people should be aware that the amount of variety you have and what sets you apart is I think the variety, the quality, also the lack of preservatives and low sodium, and you're really providing people with all of the components they need to cook whatever they possibly might want to cook.
Yeah, we took a completely different approach. The product you see today is the end result of close to, I'd say, probably 15 years of development with the military through Natick Labs. If you look at how the average person grocery shops, that's what we've sort of modeled our offerings on. You know, you don't necessarily go to the store and buy all high sodium, high carb, inexpensive, meatless meals. That's just not what you're feeding your family on a regular basis. And the military, when they're looking at taking care of our war fighters, they're looking at how to provide the best nutrition, how to minimize digestive stress, for lack of a better description, basically give them the best value they can get on the field for what would be normal food day-to-day shopping. So we've kind of modeled our entire offering around that sort of that grocery trip. When you shop for the family, you might pick up a few chicken breasts, you might pick up some burgers, maybe a roast for the weekend, a couple of desserts, some side dishes, and that's basically what you can do with us. Make your own meals, pick your own side dishes. You just have a tremendous amount of variety. You know, you can have a chicken breast tonight, or like you said, that piece of salmon with maybe rice, or like you said, ancient grains, and tomorrow it could be with our roasted root vegetables, and the next day with couscous. So you've got just unlimited choices, and that's, I think, what this industry is sort of forgotten is, they package everything up into one meal fits everybody, and it really doesn't today.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's so much variety that you guys offer. Just the convenience of it also. Like you say, there's a practical component to this. You can whip a lot of this stuff up relatively quickly. I mean, the salmon rehydrated instantly, the grains rehydrated in like 5 minutes. With respect to like the development process with the military, you guys sell a lot of this stuff to like the submarines, the Navy. Can you talk a little bit about how you've honed the product over the years working with them?
Yeah, I can actually. We've done a couple of different lines of development with the military specifically. One is for the war fighters, and that primarily today is with the U.S. Army and with the U.S. Navy. Any ship that goes out to sea for more than 30 days, for example, is typically limited by fresh and frozen food storage space. And in the past, they've relied on canned or air-dried foods, but they have the same limitations that everybody else does. And now with some of the freeze-drying technology catching up to, really we're that's sort of that fresh food alternative. We can send them out with everything from lobster tails to cheeseburgers. And the other side of that development has been sort of the civic defense, if you will, the continuity of government. Those are sort of some of the mass produced that we've canned for some 22, 25 years now, I think. And then your whole, that's a whole different institutional realm. So there's a couple of different ways that we've gone with the military.
So they're bringing this stuff onto the ships because it doesn't require energy for refrigeration. And so that's one of the benefits for preparedness, is that all of the energy that's required is input prior, and all you have to do is rehydrate it. A lot of people are worried about powering refrigerators after a grid down event. This freeze-dried food makes it so you don't have to rely on those things. You basically just need a cool, dark place to store it, and it will last indefinitely.
Yeah, and you really don't even need, it's not temperature sensitive, so it doesn't even have to be cool and dark, to be honest with you. You basically have a microbiologically inert atmosphere inside the factory sealed bag, and it doesn't care what the temperature is outside or whether it's in light or not. It will be the same 50 years from now as it is today, if it was produced today.
Yeah, so you're getting pretty much like 99, or is it 98% of the moisture out of the bag?
It's close to 99%. Yes, anything under 5% is what you're shooting for, and we're almost under a point now, under a percentage.
Now you said that you're supplying like the DoD and the military. Have you noticed an uptick with respect to all of the stuff that's going on right now? That's
a good question. Yes and no. Yes, in that we've seen I would say a high volume for the last several years. That really hasn't changed that much, and hence the no side of the equation. But I think what we've started to see, which is interesting, is the personal purchases from the government side. That has gone up significantly as of late. Government purchases are one or several items in extremely large quantities. That's stayed relatively constant, but now the individuals that maybe work for that department are now making individual purchases, and that has gone up recently. That's always interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in light of everything that's going on, people are trying to get prepared, and I suppose if a person is familiar with your product, they would obviously opt for something they know that's tried and true. I mean, this really is the cuisine of freeze-dried foods. I don't think there's anything on the market that's superior to it. It's not like you're making these elaborate dishes or anything. You're just taking food and you're freeze-drying it, and you also are able to do larger foods, which is something that I think is unique to your company.
We're using only 100% U.S. grown meats and vegetables, fruit, nothing foreign. Everything is done here locally in the state of Arizona. And that allows us, I think, to control the quality, because with the supply chain problems that we've had over the last few years, those direct relationships that allowed us to control the quality have now allowed us to control the actual quantity. So I'm able to continue to bring food in because we do locally source, but then combined with our process, which is really what sets us apart from anybody else, that allows us to do that whole steak or that whole chop or that whole chicken breast or that whole pizza, frankly. That's next generation technology that we've really spent the last few years working on, and nobody's been able to figure that out yet.
Yeah, without disclosing any of your secrets, for people who aren't familiar with freeze-dried food, a lot of freeze-dried food you get is broken down into very small components, no bigger than, the size of like a hash brown, like a centimeter by centimeter. And whether it's chicken cubes or whatever, because it's more cost effective to freeze dry smaller items, they're quicker to freeze dry, it doesn't take as much energy. But you guys have found a way to do bigger stuff, like much bigger stuff, like full steaks. I'm looking at a full New York steak here, New York sirloin steak.
Yep, that's actually 4 or 5 steaks in one package, and that does set us apart. That's the difference between the commercial, if you will, and the consumer side of the business. But that's commercial next level. Basically, what you're doing by freeze drying is you're withdrawing the moisture. You're pulling all the moisture out of that particular piece of meat or that steak, for example, and that's difficult to do when it's a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter piece of meat. But now when you're talking about a 1/2 inch or a 3/4 inch thick steak, that's just not something that the average place can do. That's something we've focused on for the last 10 years. Now we've got the ability to do whole fillets of seafood, varying fat contents, things that were traditionally never able to be freeze dried in the past, we can actually do today. So the technology has come a long way.
Yeah, that's incredible. And do they use do you guys make stuff for MREs, or is it mostly just for onboard consumption?
Yeah, that's how the freeze dry business for us started. We started as an MRE company 25 years ago, and still are to this day. But the MREs, specifically the cold weather meals, ready to eat, cold weather combat rations, went to freeze dried a number of years ago, and that's sort of how we got into the freeze dried side of the business. Traditionally, MREs are done in a pouch, a retort pouch, and as you know, they're ready to eat, fully cooked, fully hydrated. But you take that pouch into a cold weather environment, and it freezes, and you're going to have a problem. So that's how we got started in the freeze dry business 24 years ago. They came to us and said, hey, can you do these entrees and these side dishes? And lo and behold, that's where we are today.
Yeah, and something we noticed about your packaging, the communist cameraman, I'm sure you're familiar with him. He was dissing your packaging. And I told him, oftentimes the best companies are so focused making a good product that they don't have all that money to invest in advertising that the companies who are trying to make up for their shortcomings in quality are using, right? So you'll find a lot of these companies right now are really trying to get into the industry, and they're overshadowing the good quality companies because they invest so much in advertising and presentation when the actual product itself is such a low grade quality. I'm not going to mention any names here, but I know, the companies. And I've seen this happen just across the preparedness space, whether it's my buddy Ron over at Atlas Survival Shelters, who I think makes like the best quality civilian bunkers in the world, unfortunately overshadowed by another company who makes a more subpar product but has much better PR and marketing, right? So that's just one thing to keep in mind, is you guys started as a wholesaler, so you're not really in the business of putting this in front of people in a grocery store or something, right?
Correct, and we probably never will. Our forte is the freeze drying tech, the technology that allows us to deal with, to make some of the advances we've made in being able to provide that whole steak, for example. Our typical retail package, if you will, for an average account for us is a 50-pound bag, a box in a bag that's literally 50 pounds. So we'll never focus on that sort of that retail side. It's just it's only been the last probably 10 or 12 years that we actually started making our products available to the consumer, because historically it was just through the government.
So you're saying that these individuals within the government are starting to buy more of this stuff for their own like personal stockpile?
That's what I assume. Yeah, you see the government email address on an order that comes through. You can only assume that it's a personal purchase. It's under an individual's name, not a department or an agency.
Yeah, I mean, in light of everything that's going on and with all the military deployments and military exercises, I could imagine that there might be a bit of a lag in terms of, because I'm sure they're pretty stocked up with your stuff as is, but I have a sneaking suspicion that you're going to be getting a lot more orders soon. What about in the civilian space? Is there a newfound interest in your company?
That's actually a really good question. So historically, think about the traditional prepper purchase. You didn't try to put a year's worth of food away all at once and put yourself in debt. You historically made smaller purchases over time, sort of a measured growth of your food pantry, and that included your other supplies, medical, water, tools, whatnot. Now I think we're seeing a difference in that. People are going into debt over their food purchases. So rather than the traditional measured purchases, we're seeing very large 5 of everything. I'll take 10 of this, 10 of that, and 10 of that, almost like panic buying. That's sort of been the trend for the last couple of weeks now. And I don't know if that's related to anything in particular or just sign of the times, but it has changed.
And I will say that freeze-dried food, a lot of people are looking for economic safe havens right now. And depending on how you strategize, obviously there's a premium when you buy freeze-dried food because you're paying for the energy that went into it. So you're going to pay more than you would for a steak at the grocery store. I view it as an appreciating asset in some ways, because if you consider, all of the supply chain hiccups, many trends are forecasting that the agricultural sector is going to have issues in the future with respect to production because of whatever disease comes around or whatever war starts. We can expect that food inflation is likely going to continue in the future, and this is a way to somewhat mitigate that. So if a person is, stockpiling this stuff now, this isn't financial advice or anything, but food is something you're always going to use, especially if it's food that you're going to consume. Like, I know that this steak, I can eat it anytime in the next 40, 50 years, basically for the rest of my life. And how much is this going to be worth in 20, 30 years, right? So will it have doubled, tripled, quadrupled in price by that point?
Yeah, you look at it like this. You insure your house, your automobile, you insure your business. But if you don't need that insurance, you can't eat it 10 years from now. If you insure your family's food and you don't need that in 10 years from now, you can turn around and eat it, get your money back. And you mentioned inflation. The way pricing is going, it may be worth twice. It may become a savings for you. In other words, shopping today for a meal 10 years from now, it may be a tremendous investment, actually.
Yeah, and people often compare it to insurance, and I've made that comparison before. I think I did a video where I calculated what the average person will spend on insurance throughout their life, and it can be up to $500,000, depending on your income, throughout the course of your life on various different types of insurance. And the different thing with this is that this is insurance you'll actually get back. If nothing bad happens, you can still eat the food. Whereas if nothing bad happens with fire insurance, you don't get money back, or you don't get your auto insurance back. So yeah, it's a good comparison because people are willing to invest when they're obligated to. This is something that of their own volition, and I don't think it's a bad thing, especially this day and age, to focus on something like this. A lot of people swear by other food preservation methods like dehydration, canning, and I think those are good methods, but I think it's very hard to argue with that freeze-dried food isn't the most superior type of long-term survival food. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it changes the food the least, I think, and that's important. Just from a nutritional loss perspective, from a shelf life, freeze drying is the way to go, because it we all worry about pulling that freeze dried whatever steak or chicken breast out of the pantry in a couple of years, and the lights go out, and try to keep the kids happy. But the reality is it will be the closest to what you will actually purchase at the grocery store because of that. And therefore the kids won't know the difference. So quality wise, it's the least change, I guess, if that makes sense, to the actual food compared to canning or heat processes like dehydration.
And just for people, we probably should have talked about this first, but if you were to give somebody the quick 15-second elevator pitch on what is freeze drying, I guess the other part of that is, how is it different from dehydration?
Yeah, dehydration uses heat. It's a similar process, except that heat will change the food. It will partially cook foods. You'll notice with our offerings that we do a mix of uncooked and cooked, and you just can't really do an uncooked, like a beef jerky, for lack of a better real-world comparison, becomes a cooked piece of meat when you're done with that dehydration process. Or in freeze drying, you'll come out with an actual uncooked piece of meat that you can then cook to taste, to season the way you want. So that's the primary difference, is there's no heat.
Yeah, and you do have varieties that are uncooked, like a lot of your meat varieties are uncooked, but you do have a lot of cooked varieties as well. So if people wanted, you got freeze-dried chicken nuggets. That's amazing.
I mean,
yeah, that came out of the military relationship many years ago, and they wanted that uncooked piece of meat. And I guess we carried that over to the consumer side, because today people have dietary concerns or everything from food allergies or to personal preference. And what better way to ensure that you're getting a piece of meat that is gluten-free and chemical-free and additive-free than starting with an actual raw piece of meat that you cook and season the way you want. And I think that's just been really well received by the consumer. That's why we've continued it.
Yeah, and I can see that's why it's popular on, military ships and stuff, because then they can mix and match and keep morale high, because under the stress of not just a military deployment, but a survival situation, a preparedness lights out situation, simple things like that can be one of the biggest morale boosters. I mean, when I worked in a logging camp, the cook was really the centerpiece of the whole camp. Like, everything kind of revolved around the cook.
If the closer to normal you can keep life in a disaster situation, the better for everybody. And that normal means an occasional holiday meal or a birthday meal, or you're just not going to find that anywhere else. So that will be important. That morale will make a big difference.
Do you guys get any orders from, do you ever get any, celebrities? You don't have to say any names or anything, but do you ever get any, notable people making large purchases?
Quite a few. Yeah, more than I ever would have imagined, to be honest with you.
Wow. So what are they buying? Are they buying the good stuff?
No, it's interesting. They have the same worries that the rest of us do. They're preparing for a potential earthquake or tornado, and they're buying the same food. Their kids eat chicken nuggets just like our kids do, and they're looking for that occasional steak dinner. But most of the time, they're pulling a chicken breast out of the fridge at night and throwing a handful of broccoli in a dish and side of rice, and they're eating just like you and I. So they just want the same thing, to be able to continue that if the power ever went out.
Yeah, or do you see surges in demand when there's another crisis that presents itself?
Yeah, we do. It's a very cyclical business. starting back in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit, when the military was literally landing helicopters in our parking lot. Unfortunately, it's a difficult business to plan for because of that. So whether it's swine flu, bird flu, Ebola, or COVID-19, anytime anything hits the news, we tend to see panic buying. It's just the nature of the business, I guess.
Yeah, and encourage people to do it before the panic sinks in, because it's kind of like buying the dip in the stock market. You don't buy when everybody else is buying, because that's usually what happens right before a crash, and that's usually when you're going to have the least amount of variety, the longest shipping times, and the highest prices. So you really want to get ahead of the mob, get ahead of the curve.
Yeah, always used to drive me crazy. And I spent a year in Florida, and before every storm, there were lines to buy flashlights and batteries and generators. And if you live in an area that has storms every year, why you wouldn't have that on hand already just amazes me. But I guess it's just human nature. We all we wait till the last minute, and then, of course, it's very inconvenient and very expensive.
Well, my thing is, the government is the biggest preppers. I mean, they got strategic stockpiles of everything we could imagine. They got bunkers. They got, we spend huge amounts of money on the military. So it's only prudent for a person to take responsibility and have their own little mini, emergency plan. I mean, it just makes perfect sense. I mean, this actually was something that was customary a long time ago, where you had to plan. Like, everybody was of the preparedness mindset because starvation was always on everybody's mind. Now that's something which is a foreign idea. The idea that you have to prepare for going without and the supply chain breaking down. People got a little glimpse of that in the past 3 years, but I don't think people fully appreciate how quickly it can all come undone. But I was going to say, well, the one good thing about your industry is you can, because the food lasts pretty much forever, you guys can just make it and you never have to worry about cycling inventory quickly, I'd imagine.
We have the fresh and then the freeze-dried side of it. Historically, we would always maintain very large stocks because the nature of the Department of Defense orders means the call may come in and it's 45,000 pounds of, we have the fresh and then the freeze-dried side of it. Historically, we would always maintain very large stocks because the nature of the Department of Defense orders means the call may come in and it's 45,000 pounds of pork chops, and then the next day it could be 180 cases of steak. So we've always maintained high stocks of fresh and frozen food on site. And that turned out to be a blessing through the pandemic when, for a number of different reasons, supply shut down virtually overnight. Just transportation was an issue. Nobody had cold storage. There were all kinds of issues. On the shelf, it would certainly be real easy to store a product with a 25-year shelf life indefinitely, because having it stored and collecting dust on the shelf is we'll react to those real-time orders. And fresh food, in other words, we cut more steaks and they go in the freeze dryer that night. It's literally a 24-hour day operation. So we're a little different than most in that. Our surge capacity, I think, is what sets us apart from anybody else. And that comes from the government business.
And if you don't mind me asking, like, how big is your facility, like, in terms of square footage?
Yeah, I don't mind at all. We're actually a campus of several buildings. We've got about 45,000 square feet overall, and I'd say probably 2/3 of that is refrigerated, and I've probably got about another 20 to 25,000 square feet of just freezer space, and then machines take up another. I say campus because it is truly spread out. Maybe another 10,000 square footage of just actual freeze dryer space.
And so you guys had to build your own freeze dry machines.
We did, yeah. We use a number. We actually do use some consumer and some commercial off-the-shelf models, but the kind of work that we do, it has to be a proprietary machine. You just can't get the level of vacuum that we need on anything that's over the counter. So we had to build not only the hardware, but the software, which is the biggest piece of it. We had to write that software. It's a pretty complex dance of freezing something and then slowly warming it up. And under a vacuum, you're drawing that melt, if you will, off in the form of a gas rather than a liquid. And it's just 40 or 50 of those cycles over time. And you wind up with what you called a piece of styrofoam, and that's a good thing.
And what is, you guys use a different method for ensuring that in the bag it stays without oxygen. What is nitrogen flushing?
That's a good question, and I don't know why more people don't do this, but the problem historically with long-term storage of items with fat is that the oxidation of the fat, or what we refer to as the fat going rancid over time, is your biggest limiter on shelf life. And nitrogen flushing is a very simple way to get rid of any residual oxygen. Nitrogen is heavier than air, and by filling that bag with nitrogen, you'll force the air out, and sealing it, even with an oxygen absorber and a desiccant for backup, you wind up with a truly inert atmosphere inside the bag, and therefore no chemical reaction, no spoilage can occur. And I don't know why more people don't do that. It's expensive, but well worth it. That's what's going to give you the shelf life more than the freeze drying. So
there's no oxygen in this bag, is what you're saying?
There's no oxygen. It's inert, truly inert.
And so this, some people, I've had questions about the clear part of this. Maybe you could talk a bit about what the packaging is made out of. This is Mylar, right?
Yeah, that's another big misconception, honestly, is people assume that the clear packaging is a weakening of the material. And the reality is, with the multiple layered bonded Mylar packaging today, color is just literally like a powder coat. It's a spray on. You can get them in any color of the rainbow you want. So clear is just a fine silver. It's provides the same oxygen penetration barrier as the actual colored Mylar, and therefore is zero loss of shelf life. So why wouldn't you put a window? As a consumer, I always want to see what I'm purchasing, and Mylar has been, I think, over the years, something to hide. If you saw what was in the buckets, you probably wouldn't be too comfortable purchasing them again. So yeah, it's not a hindrance to shelf life. It has zero impact whatsoever.
I never thought about that, how you say, it was a great way to hide what's going on in there. And yeah, I mean, you guys are literally transparent about what's in your product, right? I think a lot of people presume that Mylar is like a metal, but it's actually a plastic, right?
It is. It's a poly.
Is it metallized sometimes?
No, there's actually no metal component to it. So I think it's just gotten that reputation over the years, but it's a purely synthetic poly material. No metal at all.
This is really good information because there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding this kind of stuff, and I think you're answering a lot of people's questions today. I would hope that people would, in the comment section, if they have any other questions about this whole process of freeze drying, that they make sure they put them in there, because it's very rare to have somebody of your level of expertise talk about exactly how the process goes, because there are many companies who aren't as transparent. And that's one thing I'll say, is that you have a good company when the owner is willing to come on and just talk to you about anything with no strings attached. Like, there was no expectation. You didn't ask me for any sort of questions that I was going to ask you ahead of time or anything. So I think that's pretty cool. And I that came across in our email exchanges, that you genuinely are trying to make a high quality product that people are going to enjoy, and that's something that is definitely admirable for sure. And you guys don't put expiration dates, but you do put date of manufacture. Yeah, so you guys don't put you don't put expiration, but you do put date of manufacture dates on the product, and that's just to let people know.
On the back of every package, that's a government requirement, a regulatory thing. And best by dates or expiration dates are also regulatory unless you can prove through a lab study that your shelf life is greater than 5 years, which we've done. So there's no need for it. I think they're misleading, but you do want a date of manufacture, because someday in 15 or 20 years, you may want to rotate stock and move some of the older stuff out and use it on a camping trip and bring new stuff in. So we use a Julian date code. That's a government requirement on the back of every package. The first 2 digits of the year and the last 3 of the day or year, so you'll always know when it was manufactured.
And what is your personal favorite freeze-dried food? Like, do you have a personal favorite that you make?
Ribeye steaks. Yeah, ribeye steaks, that's the king of all steaks. And it's a high-fat cut of meat.
You realize that you're going to get a huge demand now for ribeye steaks.
Unfortunately, we're sold out right now. That's the other thing, is we're working on it. We're sold out of a lot of products right now, but we're working on it. So keep your eyes peeled. It's coming.
Well, what's a runner-up that you have in stock?
Pulled pork is always very popular. That's something that we actually smoke in-house. And we do a pulled chicken that's amazing. No additives, no chemicals. It's just all natural chicken breast pulled. And you get some dark meat in it, which people tend to like. We do chicken thighs, boneless, skinless. That's always very popular. No additives, just chicken, cage-free, hormone-free, all natural. And then I'd say our desserts are always high on the list. We do whole slices of cheesecake, brownie bites, 5 different types of pound cakes, chocolate cake, chocolate covered strawberries. We do some things that nobody else does. And then I'd say the variety of side dishes, fully cooked ancient grains like you talked about, some of those are always popular.
Delicious, yeah. I mean, I normally wouldn't be one to buy freeze-dried carbs, maybe vegetables, just because, a lot of those things are going to last damn near forever anyways, like rice if properly stored. But I think for this kind of thing, there are those exotic things, like we do have some eggs here, some lobster, wild caught lobster. I mean, that's crazy. This to me is gold. Like meat, protein, freeze-dried protein is gold. It's an edible form of gold. You guys do offer a lot of carbs, but you offer a lot of vegetables as well, and I think they're all reasonably priced, and people can use the 15% discount that you were generous enough to offer my viewers. Being a business owner myself, I know that 15% is a pretty big, hit, right? But you were willing to do that for our viewers, and I think that's awesome. So if you guys go and you use coupon code Canadian Prepper, then you'll get that 15% off, which is just an amazing deal, I think, for a very high quality product. It's very important that we support American businesses who are legit, the real deal, care about their customers. It's very easy to just go for the cheaper alternative because it's cheaper, but there's a reason why it's cheaper.
It's worth it to me if we get just one more family prepared to put some food away for that rainy day. I'd rather cut profit and sleep a little better at night doing that.
I knew right away in our engagements that this guy actually cares about his product. So I think that's amazing. I always ask people on the channel, and when I have them on talking about preparedness matters, what are you personally doing along the lines of preparedness? I know the old saying, the cobbler has no shoes. So oftentimes you're so busy just helping other people that you haven't really thought about your own emergency preparedness plan, other than that you have a warehouse full of freeze-dried food. But what is your prognostication for the future with all the things going on in the world, and what are you doing to prepare for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I've been a prepper for probably 30 years. So to me, the thing that drives me is normalcy. Not only food. I want to eat normal, but I want to live normal. So I'm looking at power, and I'm looking at ways to grow my own food. I eat healthy now, and I want to continue to eat healthy in a disaster. So I'm not really doing anything different. I'm trying specifically not to do anything different, except everything I buy is with a long-term view, because I have a feeling we're going to need some of that here fairly soon, the way things are going.
Good stuff. Is there anything else that people should know about the company, or I guess what you guys do, or is there anything else you wanted to add?
I want to make sure that people do take advantage of the Canadian Prepper discount, the 15%. Give us a little patience. We are seeing some unusually high volume right now, and as a result, we're back to our pandemic plan of working around the clock, which is why I've got these bags under my eyes. So we're running a few days behind, but we are shipping orders out in the order that we received them, and we've got everything in stock. We won't let you buy it unless we have it in stock. So just bear with us for a few days as we try to keep up with the volume, but we're here working, and we'll continue to be working even if that gets crazier.
Yeah, and with something like this, especially right now, before a crisis happens, if you guys are busy as you are right now, in light of everything that's going on, if that's your baseline, then I think that says something. Should something happen in the next few weeks or months, how busy you would actually be. So I would encourage people to have a little bit of patience. It's well worth the wait. I can tell you that salmon I ate today was I can still taste the juiciness of the salmon in my mouth, and it was just amazing stuff. So definitely, guys, go and check that out, and please post your comments in the description below. Where can people get more information if they want, other than the website? Do you guys have any other social media outlets?
We don't. We're not really big into it. I honestly will look at your comments for feedback. So anybody that has new product suggestions, throw them in your comments section, because I'll take a look at that. We're not a retail business. We are the wholesale guys, I guess. I'll look to you for that in your comments section if anybody has any suggestions or wants to see more information, but not real big on social media.
Yeah, my only suggestion with one of the items that I wasn't able to rehydrate properly, but you said there's a method of doing it. And I was excited about it because it was the cheesecake, right? So obviously everybody's going to be excited about that. I had a difficult time rehydrating the cheesecake. So can you give me any tips on how I can do that? Because you said that the military had a way of doing it.
Yeah, that's a tough one, actually. Most people don't, and myself included, don't actually rehydrate the cheesecake. Even though we do full whole slices, which nobody else does, everybody tends to do pieces or bites. The way to actually do it right is in a steam tray. And I think you messed around with that a little bit earlier. But what the Navy does with those cheesecakes specifically is they'll put them out the night before. They go out on what's called mid-rats, fourth meal of the day, the midnight ration, and just 20 minutes in a strong steam environment and then chill it for an hour is all it takes. The fat molecules will inhibit the uptake of water, so you've got to use heat, unfortunately, and the steam's a perfect way to do that without messing up the condition of the cheesecake. And there's other ways. If you've got time, wrap a wet paper towel around it, seal it in a Ziploc bag, and put it in the fridge overnight, and that'll also work well.
Yeah, because I did notice overnight it softened up a lot. I had it in, there was a bit of moisture in the container, and I kept it in there overnight, and it absorbed. But the steam method and what you said about inhibiting the fat molecules from absorbing water, that made perfect sense to me, because that's what I was intuitively thinking it was. So I'm sure that's the case for any high-fat food.
It is, yeah. You could even microwave it and wrap it in a wet paper towel, 45, 60 seconds in a microwave, and it'll basically do the same thing, and it'll create its own steam. You just wouldn't want to do that with an uncooked piece of meat, because you will start to the cooking process, you'll finish it, you'll poach it basically, and then you won't get the desired texture that you want. So for a dessert, that works great for one of our pound cakes or the cheesecakes, but for a raw piece of meat, go the slow route. And if it's a fatty cut like my ribeye, just put them in the fridge overnight and they'll come out just perfectly fine in the morning.
I got to try these ribeyes. The only other one that we tried, which was kind of 50-50, which was the pizza. And I was surprised, because I thought it was going to, you think rehydrating pizza, it's going to be a soggy mess. It was actually the opposite. It was
really?
Yeah, it wasn't soggy at all.
How did you
we steamed it.
So that should work perfect. That way you preserve the texture. You've got meat. I don't know which pizza you had, but you probably had meat and cheese and of course the crust. So you've got so many different textures that you don't want to wind up with a mess. But steaming is a good way to do that.
Do you have any other tips on the pizza? Because we kind of put it in a toaster oven afterwards just to kind of crisp it up a bit more.
Oh.
But we didn't have to do that, and then we redid it again without doing that. It was difficult for all of the layers to reabsorb properly. So I don't know if there's a technique to it or what.
No, steam is the way to go, but did you try it right out of the bag?
Didn't try it right out of the bag, no.
Next time, try that. I think we go with a thin crust pizza. It's like a pizza cracker. It's actually pretty good right out of the bag. And that's what you'll find a lot of people will do. You want a high carb, high protein snack on a hike or on a camping trip, eat it right out of the bag. Wow. But if you did want to rehydrate it, do that same method. If you don't have steam or you have the time available, wrap it in a wet paper towel, seal it in a Ziploc bag, and keep it in the fridge overnight. And it should come out, be just like a piece of cold, fresh pizza, and then throw it, like you said, in a toaster oven to firm it up again.
Okay, well, the wet napkin trick is interesting. I'll have to try that out. But thanks for all these tips, man. And we look forward to showing a lot more of this stuff. I think every other week we're going to demonstrate another meal variety. We'll keep on mixing it up, and hopefully you can use this as an opportunity to get more feedback from people. And I know you're just catering to the billionaires and the government and all the rest, but maybe us little guys can get a little prepared too.
No, the relationship's been great. We've learned a lot. We've talked to a lot of great customers, both U.S. and Canadian. We're grateful for the relationship. Hope to continue it for many years to come. Yeah,
and you guys do ship to Canada, just so people know.
We do. Europe, Canada, no problem. We do have trouble with some areas in Asia. Australia is a problem for us just because their customs doesn't necessarily allow most of the meat items in, but we'll communicate directly if there's an issue.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on today, and I look forward to having you back in the future.
Sounds good, Nate. Thanks for the time.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.